Hey, you guys. Welcome back to my City of Champions podcast, where I'm talking with local Edmonton athletes, artists, and entrepreneurs to hear their stories, find out what drives them, and learn their keys to success. Today, I'm really fortunate to be talking with an endlessly talented woman. Bree Guhle is one of the pioneers responsible for growing the practice of Joga in Edmonton. That's right, Joga. It's not jogging yoga, and it's not yoga with jeans. It's yoga for jocks, and it's certainly no joke. I've swept my way through many intense classes with Bree. In addition to being a tremendous athlete, Bree is also a wicked photographer, social media expert, and happens to be one of the sweetest and most genuine people on the planet. So make sure you go give her a follow on Instagram. It's Bree Guhle, which is BreeAGuhle, or just link to her through my Instagram page. In this episode, Bree gives us a really valuable look into a couple things, including her competitive nature, advice on controlling your breath to control your body, and also what it's like as a female coach in primarily male-dominated sports like hockey and football. It's very interesting information, and I hope you guys all enjoy my conversation with Bree. Okay, sitting here with Bree Guhle today. Bree, how you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for doing this. What's your morning look like so far?
Calls, workout, training, the regular.
So Bree is one of how many instructors for Joga in the city?
Within Edmonton, I think there's maybe three. Maybe three. I did a training year last February and trained a whole bunch, but they have to go through a certain amount of certification hours and things like that before they're actually certified trainers, so hopefully more in the next little while.
Now, would those be trainers within Edmonton, or would they have come from other cities
Both.
to train here? Okay.
So there was quite a few from Edmonton, but also surrounding areas, Calgary, Lloydminster, like all around Alberta mostly. So a little bit of both.
So whenever I tell my friends that I'm doing a Joga class, I kind of get this look like, are you just saying it weird? Are you saying it with Ron Burgundy from Anchorman? I'm going yogging.
Yeah.
They think I'm just making a joke. But for those who don't know what it is, and for anyone out there, explain a little bit basically what Joga is.
Yeah, so Joga, I've gotten the same weird looks before. Are you jogging with jeans on? No. So Joga, the J comes from jock. So it's yoga designed for athletes. So we use the biomechanics of sports and then the relaxation and breathing of yoga and bring a system of movement that helps prevent injuries in people's bodies.
Great. So you utilize basically traditional yoga movements, but in a different mannerism?
Yes. If you think about traditional yoga, if you go to a yoga class, you are constantly holding all the positions for a very long time, which doesn't make sense for an athlete's body. If you think about athletics, you're in constant movement all the time. So what Joga does is we are on a yoga mat, we're using our breath with our movement, and that's the big thing. We're moving all the time. We're not standing and holding those static postures because it doesn't make sense for your muscles. So the constant movement using the biomechanics of sports, so the sports positions that you would see in football, in hockey, in soccer, on a yoga mat.
Okay. Now, what first drew you to this?
I've always been involved in athletics, and I really, really like sports movements. I studied kinesiology, and then I did my yoga training. And then I was like, well, athletes need yoga, but they don't get it in the proper way. They go into a class and they hurt themselves, or they're doing these weird positions that don't make sense for their bodies. So I just did my research. I discovered Joga, and it's a fairly new company, or brand new company at the time. So I right away was like, this literally is me in a nutshell. So I went to the training, took it, and fell in love. And yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Right. So did you play a lot of sports growing up?
Yes. I was mostly a volleyball and track player. I also just did sports all the time after school with my brother, constantly playing athletic things.
And where did you guys grow up?
In Daysland.
Daysland, so
Yes.
Kind of a little bit more rural setting.
A small town, 800 people.
800?
Total, yeah. So
How many of those can you name?
800 people. Not as many anymore as
Yeah.
I used to be able to. When you're in school, you know a lot of people, but now I don't know that many.
Do you ever run into people that you from the town that you grew up in Edmonton?
Yeah, for sure. Mostly the random places, Superstore or places you wouldn't expect to see someone that you know.
Yeah.
But once in a while you run into people. Lots of the people, like Edmonton's the closest city to Daysland, so after high school, lots of people come to Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, occasionally I run into people.
And you and your brother are pretty close in age, right?
Yes, we are. He's a year and a half younger than me.
Would that have made you guys pretty competitive with one another?
I would say I'm more of the competitive one over him. He's really chill, relaxed, mellow. But we were always playing sports, but I wouldn't say that I was more competitive with him. He didn't really care.
Right.
My dad is also very competitive, and my mom a little bit, but more so my dad, so I think I get it.
So it's funny because I think I'm from a competitive family as well, and you don't quite realize how competitive your family is until you start experiencing other people's families.
Yeah.
and then it really becomes apparent that maybe you're the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
And you learn that you have to dial it back around some people.
Yeah,
because
true.
Not everyone's ready and willing to compete in anything that they do.
So true.
So I talked to your brother Dawson, and he asked me to bring up a story about you and a kid in elementary school, I think it was. So an incident playing dodgeball.
Oh my gosh.
He said that your competitive streak is pretty fierce.
Yeah, I won't deny that. I like to win. But that is a story. I was in, I don't know, high school, maybe junior high probably. And we were playing dodgeball, and I got a little competitive, hit him in the head, broke his glasses. Feel really bad about it. He was okay, but...
Well, I mean, if he was okay at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And it kind of makes sense that you would have gone into, an industry where you're working with highly competitive people and athletes. Now you guys also are fairly involved in horse racing and rearing horses as well. Is that the right term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So how involved are you, or have you been in that over your life?
In the horses?
Yeah.
A little bit. I really enjoy going down to the farm, seeing the horses, going to the races, watching them race. It's an intense feeling when you have a horse racing in the race. I don't get involved as much as my brother does. He loves it. He knows like all the pedigrees and that type of behind the scenes stuff that I don't know as much about. But again, it's that competitiveness of winning and wanting your horse to do good that my whole family has.
Right.
Yeah.
And can you even see it with the horses, like their competitive nature?
For sure, 100%. It's pretty cool, actually. They're athletes, and they want to win. So it's really cool to see, well, when we have them as babies, and then they grow up and start to train, seeing them run their first race is pretty cool. It's huge for my mom. Like, she does so much work. They're like family to us.
Yeah, it's like seeing a kid grow up and do something, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell from a pretty young age the horses that will be successful? And
not necessarily.
Are there late bloomers and early bloomers?
I mean, you can definitely, every one of them has their own personality, just like a person. So we've had one horse who, whenever she would go running out in the field with all the other ones her age, she would never want to be the last one in. She would always have to be first. So you see those little things. But you never know who's going to be the champion. You never know. That's what's kind of scary, but also so cool about horse racing, is that it can be like the little runt of the pack, or whatever you want to call it, that ends up being the best horse there is.
Right. Maybe a chip on the shoulder or something like that.
Yeah.
Always being last and then wanting to be first.
It's crazy.
So I think you told me once too that you can see with horses after a race, like whether they win or whether they lose.
Yeah, some of them, we've had horses, and when they win, they're so excited. They're just, and race horses are really high strung, so they are so like super intense and crazy. And after a race, you can tell like their head will be up high, they'll be prancing away so happy, like they know they won. And then
strutting
another
just
time,
like a person.
Yeah, exactly. Another time they'll lose, and you'll go back to the barn and see them, and they won't even take a peppermint from you. Like they just know that they had a bad race or didn't do well. Just literally, just like a human, an athlete.
That's wild. And that's something no one would ever understand or realize unless you kind of go and get to know the horse culture and the horse community a little bit.
Exactly. People don't really realize how big of athletes they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Like the training that they do, their bodies are insane. Like it's amazing.
Yeah, they're built specifically to run, to sprint.
And they love it. They love it. They do. They love it.
So what's happening with the Northlands racetrack and kind of, is that closing down? Are they moving it?
They're making a new track outside of Edmonton called Century Mile.
Mm-hmm.
They're making a mile-long track. It's kind of over by the airport. I think that's supposed to be done in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be really, really good for the industry. Having a mile-long track will be huge, and it will be good for the whole horse racing industry.
Getting back into more the Joga talk here. So you're going through school, did physiotherapy, came across yoga. Then where did you hear about yoga? Where did you see it? Was it on an ad in a magazine or word of mouth or?
Just researching online.
Yeah.
Google.
And did you know before then that you wanted to kind of be a coach as a career?
Yes and no. I didn't really know. I just knew that I loved body movements. I love what athletes do. I think it's incredible how they use their bodies for their career. It's amazing. They have so much drive, so much focus, and they just do so much with their bodies, and I love that. I think it's so incredible, and any way that I could help them, I wanted to do that. So when I discovered this, I thought, hey, this is really cool, this is new, this is innovative, let's try it and see what happens. And again, like I said, when I took the course, I fell in love with it. I think it's so intelligent. The whole system is amazing.
Do you think you have any particular skills or characteristics that really help you in being a coach?
It's interesting you say that, because when you think about a coach, especially for an athlete or a hockey, for example, or football, their coaches are usually men. They're usually very loud, screaming at them, telling them what to do all the time. So it's different for me because I tell them what to do, but I'm a woman. They also, and I'm soft-spoken, which is different for them. They don't hear that all the time, which I think is an advantage for me, because when I go in, it's like this calm setting where you're still doing such hard work, but you're getting like this different voice coming at you. It's almost like a nurturing, just a woman's voice, where that allows you to relax a little bit more and almost recover, which is what every athlete needs.
Right, definitely. And also I think a huge thing too, at least from my personal experience with Joga versus like a team training setting, is that it's not so much about what anyone else is doing, and it's all about what you're doing, right?
100%.
You get a team together on the ice or on the field or anything, they're always trying to one up each other.
Yeah.
But with this, it's intense and it's difficult, so you can only afford to focus on yourself.
Yeah,
so if you start looking at the guy next to you, you're going to screw up your balance, right? I think that's huge.
It's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's very humbling, especially for athletes, because they are amazing with their bodies. So something new and different like this is hard for them and challenging. That's what they like about it, because it is hard and it is challenging and it brings out your weaknesses, but they don't want to have weaknesses. So they realize if they continue to do it, those weaknesses are gonna turn into strengths.
Now, have you ever had an athlete kind of just totally push back and say, I'm not comfortable doing this, I don't want to do it? And how do you deal with that?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm sure there's people that don't like it. I've had goalies who do yoga primarily 3 days a week, and they do Joga, and it's just different. Like, once you're set in your ways, you're set in your ways. And something new and different, it takes the right person to be like, okay, this is better for me, when you already have your specific ways of doing things. So I'm sure there's people who don't like it. 100%. There's people who don't like everything, anything, any type of yoga. There's people who don't like yoga. So why do they think that they would like Joga? Until they try it, then they realize it's completely different. But there's going to be yogis who don't like Joga. A lot of yogis that don't like Joga because of what it is. It's different, completely different than what they're teaching.
Right. It's the same with any newer age mentality or philosophy or an update to any older operating system.
Exactly.
People, the traditionalists, are going to refuse it or push back because it's not the way it was designed.
Exactly.
But everything in life is always changing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Innovating.
Let's talk a little bit more about the technical aspect of Joga. When you're doing these movements, what parts of the body are becoming activated that aren't necessarily activated in everyday sports or don't get activated in the same way as you do with Joga?
Yeah, so Joga is actually not labeled as a stretching system. We label it as a neuromuscular repatterning system. So we try to the muscles that become weakened or compromised from injuries and things like that become, like I said, weak, and you stop using them, and then you get all of your other muscles working for that muscle. So your body's not actually working properly. So when we go through Joga, we really want to make sure that we're activating the correct muscles at the correct time and allowing your brain to realize which muscles should be activating. And once you continuously do that, then the feedback loop from your brain to your muscle becomes shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually it's just natural. So activating our core properly, no one does it. Whether you're doing a plank, a push-up, you're not activating your core properly. And Joga, that's a key thing in our system. So as you continue to do Joga, you realize I'll cue you all the time to activate your core. And again, that shortens the feedback loop. So eventually your core naturally is becoming activated when you're doing all these movements away from Joga. Everyday life, your sport, whatever you're doing. Same with, like, for example, glutes. Most people don't use their glutes properly, which causes a lot of pain in their knees, or they're using their quads more than their glutes, and your glutes are your biggest muscle in your body, so we need to get those activating. So again, when we go through Joga, the glutes are activated at the proper times. Again, creating that feedback loop to shorten, and then eventually you're using your glutes when you're jumping, you're squatting properly.
Right, so it's sort of like going through the motion with any sport in terms of like learning a proper swing or learning a proper stance or the right way to shoot with basketball mechanics. You need to learn to sequence it properly, otherwise you're going to be out of sync and risk injury, risk not developing the way you should develop.
Yeah.
So are there any other kind of side benefits other than flexibility, other than improved power and confidence? Are there any other sort of biological benefits or side benefits that come up from this?
Yeah, so a lot of Joga is about the relaxation that you do see in yoga. So since yoga is targeted to athletes, but not just athletes, everyday people, most people have a hard time sleeping. If you think about an athlete and they're on a road trip for 2 weeks, they skate, they have a game, then they travel the next day, have another game. By the end of their 3-3, they're exhausted. If you look at the injury list from the week before and then that week, guaranteed there's going to be a few more extra injuries because their bodies aren't recovering properly. So we really try and focus on a lot of relaxation and breathing techniques throughout Joga to help a person's body relax that they can use in a sport if they're nervous, before a game if they're nervous, if you can't sleep at night, when you're on the bus, things like that. Just small little things that your breath can do for you that will help your body recover. If your body's recovering, then your muscles are going to be able to recover. And if they're not, then that's going to cause injuries in your body. Your stress goes up, everything is out of whack.
The breathing aspect is such an undervalued part of it too, I think, right? Like when I was doing Joga regularly with you a couple of years ago, I noticed that outside of Joga, I would just be taking these much more fuller, deeper breaths. Like my belly would be fully expanding, and it's just like you feel good because you're actually sucking in air in a proper way. Yeah. And I think for me that was a huge side benefit, is just learning to breathe normally, because I think most people are stressed or carry tension and always just sort of clammed up a little bit.
No one breathes properly. That's the problem. And breath is life. Seriously. So That's huge when I'm working with a team or an athlete. To see them and teach them how to breathe properly is like, oh my gosh, it's a game changer, because you don't realize how important your breath is, whether it be learning how to belly breathe, creating or connecting to your relaxation response, or learning how to find different areas of your body to create more lung capacity for you, which will help your VO2 max when you go into fitness testing. There's like just the smallest little things that your breath can do that people don't realize that.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they're talking about breathing techniques. There's a guy named Wim Hof. Have you heard of him? So Wim Hof is like the ultra endurance guy. He's done marathons barefoot in Alaska, like on ice, and he's been submerged in buckets of freezing water for hours at a time, like that kind of thing. And he attributes his incredible control of his body systems and heat regulation purely to breathing and to his techniques.
That's amazing.
And so there's this one technique. So breathing, when we hold our breaths, and you probably know this, but when we hold our breaths, the urge to breathe isn't from a lack of oxygen. The initial primary response is from a buildup of CO2. And then once you surpass that, then you start becoming oxygen deprived. So it's a way for our body to safeguard against running out of oxygen to our brain, right?
Yeah.
So there apparently, and I haven't looked into this yet, through Wim Hof, is a way to train your resistance to that CO2 buildup marker, so that you're able to have deeper breaths, utilize more of that oxygen. Obviously, for athletes who have constant access to oxygen, not as big a deal, but a swimmer, it would be huge to be able to utilize your breath that much more efficiently.
Yeah.
So there's I agree, a whole slew of ways to utilize breath.
Actually, if next time you're in a Joga class, when we do our breathing exercise at the beginning, you'll notice that every time at the top of our breath we hold. That's because we're training our nervous system to understand it's okay to be there. Just like as in an athlete, when they're running out of breath or they're holding their breath, they realize it's okay to be here. I'm not losing my breath. I'm not dying. This is okay.
Right.
So
it creates a really warm sensation inside. You feel it's like anxiety in your chest, but in a good way, if that makes sense. You feel that same kind of activation of whatever system that is. Yeah. But it doesn't feel bad like anxiety does.
Which is interesting, because I've had lots of people tell me that they don't like that. Really? They panic when when they're holding their breath at the top, when they're full of air, they panic. They don't like it. It's
very fascinating. So you work primarily with teams now, is that right? Yeah. You started off, and this is a little to my detriment, but you used to do a lot of sort of drop-in classes, and it just took off so much that now you almost work exclusively with teams. What teams are you working with in town here?
I work with mostly hockey, just because obviously Alberta, Edmonton, Canada, hockey is the primary thing here. So in the wintertime, I work with a lot of prep teams, midget AAA teams, junior A teams, WHL teams. Right now, since it's off-season training, I work at different facilities. So I'll work at Body by Bennett, First Line Training, with the Oilers. Wherever they want me around the city, I go to them and work with those athletes. So it's different from the off-season to the in-season training. So. And
you've worked with the Eskimos too before?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Do you find, are there any differences in approach between hockey players and, say, football players?
Yes.
what are the things you notice?
If you look at a football player, and maybe the defensive line more so than the offensive line, but they're huge. They're like 6'5", 350 pounds. They're massive. So their bodies are a lot different than a hockey player would be. So you have to tailor it to them. They can't hold downward dog for very long. They can't hold plank for very long. They are so strong, but their bodies don't move as well as you would see a hockey player move. A hockey player might have really tight hips and might not be able to move, walk their feet towards their hands as well, but they can do that better than a football player who's 6'5", 300 pounds. So you have to tailor it to what they can do.
Is it empowering for you as, pretty blonde girl to have all these massive 400-pound men just following your directions to a T? Is it just sort of like, this is good, the boys are behaving, you know?
It's interesting because it's hard as a girl to go into sports. Really hard because you're a woman, and going into sports is like has been a no-no for so many years, right? So being able to work with professional athletes isn't easy, and it's stressful. You have to get their respect, and if you don't get the respect, then you're not going to be there anymore. So for me to go in there and work with them and have them follow along with me and respect me and do what I'm doing and know that it's helping them is like makes me so happy. It's huge. What
strategies do you deploy to kind of go in and get their respect? Do you have to carry yourself a certain way?
I've heard from girls who have to go in and be like really tough and really, I don't know how to explain that.
Right, like authoritative?
Yeah, where I'm opposite. I just go in and be myself. I smile, I'm happy, I'm bubbly, I talk to them. And so far, that's worked for me. And I don't want to be anyone else. I want to be myself. That's why I want them to hire me. So I don't want to be different than that.
Do you think it's that just genuineness, that authenticness that really comes through? I think whether you're authoritative or whether you're more passive, I think as long as you're being who you are, do you think that probably speaks more to anyone?
For sure, I would hope so. I mean, there's a lot of Joga trainers in Canada, and we all do the same thing, yet we're all completely different. So even though Joga is part of why we have a job, it's not just that, but it's also your personality and who you are getting that job. So I like to think that being yourself is like a key part of being given the opportunity to work with these different people.
Yeah, I think people, no matter who you are, and especially athletes coming from a pretty like tribal culture almost, they can sense outsiders who aren't being authentic. They can sense a phony, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Sense someone who's coming in with ill intent.
Yeah.
So for you, who would be your ideal client group? Like, is there some like dream team that you one day want to coach? Like, if you could coach anyone in the world.
There's a lot. Future, I would love to work in like the NFL, NBA, and work with more like the recovery side of it. So work with their athletes after games, or just if they're rehabbing an injury. I think Joga is amazing for those people who have gotten an injury, but they're done their rehab, but aren't quite ready to go back into playing. So it's like a bridge between that. So it helps them get prepared for going back and playing after they're done their rehab.
Right.
Because a lot of players will go do their rehab and then they'll go right back out into playing, and 2 months later their shoulder still hurts.
Right. The only kind of post-rehab easing into the game is a couple practices typically,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But practices are, I don't know what you want to call it, 60-70% game.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so I think that would be really amazing to do. Like I said, NFL would be really cool, NBA. I would love to work with tennis. I think like Serena Williams would be so cool. She's incredible, and she's a woman, so it would be amazing to work with her. Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
He would be great.
How receptive do you think he would be to Joga?
I don't think he would be.
No?
No.
No, you think he'd have to be forcing on him a little bit?
Oh no, sorry, no. I misunderstood. I think he would be into it. I think when you're that level of athlete, you have to be open to new things that are going to help you. And I think anything that his coaches or he thinks is going to make him better, he'll try.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but would Joga be more beneficial to sports in which you have quite a bit more muscular imbalance? So any sport that you're leaning one way or the other more than anything, like hockey, tennis, baseball. I'm trying to think. Football is so dependent on the position. Obviously, quarterback would be a lot more one-sided than a lineman, say.
I mean, it's amazing for that because there's so many imbalances, but Joga is great for everyday people or people who have chronic pain, rehabbing injuries, for everybody. Mostly everyone has imbalances in your body, whether you're an athlete or not. So I think yoga is great for everyone.
Is there a best time to do it in an active schedule? So, for example, a hockey player might work out in the morning and then skate in the afternoon. Is it best for him to do it at the end of his day winding down, or is it better to do it pre-activity?
Yeah, it just depends on exactly what their week is like. Usually we'll either do it on an off day when they don't have training and they don't have skating, or after their workout on a day where they don't have skating. Depending on what we're doing as well. It might be an active recovery, or it might be just regular simple stretching.
Right.
Nothing more than that.
Yeah, because it is in and of itself a workout. Like you sweat in yoga.
Yeah.
It's not just a relaxed stretching class by any means.
Definitely not.
So with yoga, do you kind of implement or follow yourself any specific nutrition plan?
For myself?
Well, for yourself, and then also do you advocate it for your athletes that you coach as well?
Most of them, I mean, if they ask me my opinion, I'll tell them, but I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not gonna tell them eat this, this, and this, and this, because I'm not that. I can give them the name of a nutritionist to go talk to, or tell them what I eat, but I'm not gonna, that's not my forte, so I don't want to be the person to be telling them things.
Right. And what kind of nutrition plan do you follow?
Just live in a healthy lifestyle. I eat what I like, but I don't eat poorly. When I want something like chocolate, I'll eat it.
So pretty much balanced, everything in moderation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's good. Basic, I think, typically works for the most broad amount of people.
Yeah.
So would you classify your coaching as more of being in the fitness industry or being more in the health and wellness? And is there a difference between those communities?
That's tough, because I think fitness, when people think about fitness, they think about personal training and like group classes, studios, and then when you think about health and wellness, you think more nutrition, rehab, physio, things like that. So where yoga can be in both. It can be set in a yoga studio setting, or it can be set in a physiotherapist clinic one-on-one with an individual. So it's a little bit of health and wellness when you're rehabbing injuries, but fitness in the same sense when you're using it as your training. So
do you see any problems with either of those communities right now? Are there anything that you see, troubling trends that are kind of coming, misinformation, or?
I think there's a lot of facilities now, a lot of trainers now, and you have to find the right person for you. I think that it's important when you're trying to be an active person, to find something that you really like. If you don't like running, don't run. Maybe you like yoga instead, so go to that person. But it's also important to make sure that you're finding a person who knows what they're doing, because there's so many personal trainers now, there's so many everything now. So I would say the only thing that I think is getting better is that the fitness industry is constantly innovating and constantly changing, and there's so many new things, which is great, because finally those things are being introduced, whereas before in the past I feel like it was just set in stone, the old times, what it was like, and people just followed that and didn't really want to, if you're set in your ways, you don't want to expand into new innovative things. Whereas now I think that like functional movement is becoming way more popular than just lifting weights for athletes, which is exactly what yoga is functional movement. So finally it's becoming like a bigger thing for people.
Right, it's just sort of more of an overall healthier approach to it. It's not so single-minded.
Exactly.
It can be applied to anything you do in life, right?
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to someone who hasn't really pursued any form of fitness throughout their life, who now, in their mid-20s or early 30s, is looking to make a change in their life? Because it can be incredibly hard, as you said before. Like, people are so stuck in their ways.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone trying to implement a regular athletic routine into their life?
I would tell them to find something that they love. Do running, do yoga, do Pilates, do weight training. Try everything, and then you're going to find something that you do really like. You don't want to go to the gym every day and hate going to the gym every day, or go on a run and hate it the whole time. So I would say try things, try new things. Maybe you like Zumba, go to Zumba. Like, if you like it, do it. No matter what you're doing, like get your physical activity, but do something that you love. Don't do something that you hate every single day. Now,
as an athletic person, where would you draw the line, though, of someone not doing something up until the point they start to they stop disliking it and start liking it? Like, a lot of the times you don't like something just simply because you're not good at it or because you don't have experience. But the second you start seeing improvement and you start getting a little confidence, all of a sudden you like it. So there's that gray area where you're like, well, I think I don't like it, but how long do I pursue it until I decide?
I'll try it for a couple of weeks. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to. Some people know they hate running, and so don't do it. Like, do something else. But
right.
Maybe you'll like it in a week or two. I doubt it, but maybe. But like weight training, people don't like lifting weights at first, but once you start doing it, it's actually really fun. So you might like it. So I don't know. Just give everything a go. And
what's the saying? It takes 21 days to get addicted to something?
I have no idea.
Never heard that one before? I'll have to look that one up. So last question, what most excites you kind of going into the future in your professional and your personal life, about your industry?
Yeah. So I hope to expand Joga out into different areas of the world. The US, Europe even would be incredible. Work with NFL, NBA, professional soccer would be really cool. So that's just my dream and my goal, to have that happen over the next while. Pursue that as much as possible.
Perfect. Well, that sounds good, and wish you the best. And everyone out there listening, make sure you check out Joga with Bree, right?
Yeah.
And what are your handles on social media?
Bree Guhle, Breaguhle.
And that's for Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thanks a lot, Bree.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.